So, Bishop Colm, we're here chatting about the Cathedral, and I suppose we're three years on now from the devastating inferno of Christmas Eve 2009, when the interior was gutted, and plans are now in place to maybe have Mass there on Christmas Eve of 2014, and we have various construction firms in place, so very positive so far. And in terms of those plans, are we still on target for that?
Well, we'd like to hold that date out there in front of the builders, especially that we're aiming for that. Whether we'll achieve it, I wouldn't like to be asked to swear on the Bible we'll get there, but we'll certainly keep trying. And I'm impressed by the manner in which the work is being attacked, if you like, at the moment. I was in the Cathedral 2 evenings ago, and the activity there is just extraordinary, I must say. You think people are working to save their own lives. I was very impressed by the quality of the performance. So if that momentum can be kept up, and I see there was no reason why it wouldn't, then I think it'll get finished in good time, let's put it that way. And if it gets finished for that Christmas, that's a real bonus.
And there is plans also in place to run a course here in Longford that specific to some of the skills that are required to refurbish the cathedral, such as conservation skills. So I suppose, the old adage, God doesn't close one door but he opens another, it maybe rings true now, because this could potentially give local people jobs at a time, I suppose, when there's a terrible recession in the country.
That's right, it has. Well, that's the immediate benefit, and that's obviously one. I mean, anything that is the way of hope is very welcome, and that's a way of hope for sure. And I'd like to think that in the longer term that Longford can benefit by that in a significant way. If we get the reputation for being what they call a centre of excellence in that context, then it puts Longford in a good place for the future. And that old saying about God not failing to open a new door, well, that if that were the case, well, that would be a significant step in that direction. And people in time to come might be saying something like, well, it was an appalling thing that we lost the magnificent cathedral in a fire. But in the end of the day, that has been beautifully restored. I'd like to think they'd be saying that. And not only that, but we've got benefits as well of a real economic kind and social kind which came with it. So that would be entirely good news at that stage. It would be a win-win.
And of course the cathedral really holds a very special place in the hearts of Longford people, whether those people live in the county or whether they're living in London or New York or in Australia. It has always held a special place in the hearts and in the minds of Longfordians.
It has. I think I probably said this before, but I'll repeat it here, that when the awful atrocity happened, it was inundated with correspondence and telephone calls and all that by people who were absolutely distraught that this should have happened. And the number of stories I heard about people's memories, and the links that they had with the cathedral. Even when we had an exhibition during the Eucharistic Congress in Dublin, and there were people coming up and saying to me, well, my grandmother actually was from Longford, or I know that my grandfather worked there in the cathedral in some capacity in the distant past, and so on. Numerous stories, all of which are very heartening and very touching, I tell you.
The €30 million financial injection, I suppose, that it's getting, obviously it's required to get it back to where it needs to be. But there has been some negative feedback, certainly when we ran the story on the front page of the Longford Leader a couple of weeks back, we did receive some comments that suggested that maybe in the current economic climate €30 million could be spent on lots of other worthwhile projects as well. And I suppose, in terms of the fact that there are so many people who are struggling, I suppose, and they're on the breadline, and so I suppose there's a lot of social difficulties out there as well. But have you had any negative feedback in relation to that particular spend?
No, I didn't get that particular slant on it at all from anybody, to be honest. What I'd say about that is in relation to the benefits that I just mentioned there. community is going to benefit. You know, it's not just the restoration of the cathedral, but if the things that I'm hoping and we're hoping to see happen, if those actually do happen, you know, it will be very beneficial to the community. I think one thing that there might be misunderstanding about, and I'd like to clarify this. We were obliged in law, the law of the land, to restore the cathedral. You know, the Department of the Environment would insist on that. In fact, the man who was minister for that aspect of life was John Colm in the last government, and he launched a book here in Longford on heritage, and he made specific mention of the cathedral in it, and he said, we want it restored as it was before the fire. Now you might say, why would a government minister be giving us that instruction? Well, he was, I suppose, referring there to the law of the land, that a listed building under the rules of heritage, there's a requirement that you restore it. In fact, if we didn't restore it, you know, there are penalties for not doing so, and even a term in jail if it was pushed to the limit. So it's not as though we were free to spend money on something else instead. We weren't. That's the truth of the matter.
Yeah. Okay. So and of course the fact that it is in the heart of the town, and the fact that it is integral to the community that it actually is in. I suppose once it opens its doors again, once it's refurbished, once people see for themselves, you know, that this lovely cathedral back again, and they're able to go to mass once again in it, and go and receive all the necessary sacraments and be part of it again. I suppose that's going to change people. You know, really cement the whole restoration project in people's minds.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about that. I think, you know, I suppose the basic reason, while I mentioned the law requiring that we restore it, I would think myself that the vast bulk of people in Longford here, if I'm reading them correctly, would not want it otherwise. In fact, they'd be scandalised and astonished that we'd think of doing otherwise, because for the very reason that, you know, they were so emotional about the destruction of the cathedral, and I can see that that's a clear indication that, you know, that's where their heart is, and any suggestion that we might move away from that would go down very badly with Longford people, I've no doubt.
Yeah. Now, maybe just we'll take a turn now, and we'll maybe look at your career. I mean, you have a career that's spanning, I think, 52 years now in the religious, in the priesthood, and you've been a bishop for 29 years. I think you'll be 30 years in April of 2013.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a very long time.
It is, and it all began in the Latin school in Moyne.
Well, my own secondary schooling was in St Mel's College, actually.
Okay.
And now, the Latin School, of course, was a great nursery of vocations in North Longford, and I remember many years ago when I was young, there was a survey done of parishes from which the numbers of vocations had been significant, and in the whole country, the one I think which came out tops was actually Dramard, which is in North Longford too. But my own parish of Colm would have been very strong in that regard as well. And it was in my own family that actually 3 of us became priests, and that's, I'm very happy to recall that. And some people would know that, they still know that out from my own native place. And 30 years is most of 30 years. As you say, it's an awfully long time, an eventful time too, I can tell you. And
You've seen a lot of changes.
I've seen a lot of changes.
Yeah.
And we've been talking about the cathedral, and there were, you know, many very eventful occasions there. I suppose the one that stands out for me is that event on the 10th of April 1983 when my own ordination as bishop happened there, and that was an enormous event in my own life as well as in the life of the community. So there were a lot of great memories of ministry, I can tell you, and I do it all again if I had to.
Would you? Yeah. And so obviously you always wanted to. It was something you always kind of wanted to be.
Yes, I think that's fair enough. I always keep saying that I wasn't exactly sure of that at a stage when I was in secondary school. I wasn't sure first. There were other possibilities there, and other ones were in my mind too. So it wasn't as though that I felt like that at all times. Although, mind you, it was always there. I think even if I had seriously thought about something else, I probably would have come back to what I'm doing anyway, I think, to be honest. Even if I went elsewhere or tried something else, I think I'd have felt drawn back to the priesthood, I think.
Yeah, I suppose the priest plays an integral role in a community, because there's a spiritual aspect, there's a support and a guidance aspect, and there's many roles. A priest has many roles in a community.
He has a lot of roles in the community. There's no doubt about that, and I'm sure everybody would notice the fact that when something significant happens in the community, either joyful or painful, and the latter more often than the joyful, the first person that's asked to speak about it is the priest usually. If there's a horrendous accident, like I was talking last Sunday about the road accidents, because it was the National Day of Prayer for victims of road accidents.
That's right.
But think of situations where people are killed on the road in any parish in Ireland, and they're looking for somebody to say words of comfort or, to talk about the impact on the community. Invariably, it's the local priest. So I suppose that's an indication of how significant a person is in the life of the parish, people of the community.
And now we spoke a little bit earlier about the recessionary times at the moment, and I suppose when you at the time in your life when you would possibly have been considering going into the priesthood and growing up in Colm, there were hard times back then as well.
Oh, there were hard times. There were. I suppose we got used to a lot of comfort really, and things that we take for granted now, like central heating and even electricity in the home. I was thinking of when I was growing up, that didn't exist in rural Ireland. And all those things now that have made life a lot easier for people weren't even available to them. And the disposable income was extremely low at that time. But somehow or another, I think having, gotten used to different things, the impact of austerity is all the greater. So I'm really concerned about where we're heading at the moment, and I'd like to think that we wouldn't end up with a whole generation of people who would be damaged permanently by the appalling austerity we're going through. And I think it's questionable that that's even the right thing to be doing. Now, I know that there are huge arguments about that made by people who are acting for us in the leadership role in Ireland, and we have to be advised by what they think. But I find it very distressing to find people being damaged in a way that I think they mightn't recover from for a long time. So that's really sad and serious.
Yeah, well, certainly it's very evident that people are really struggling mentally, emotionally, job-wise, financially. But then I suppose if you look at the teachings and the Catholic Church and at the Bible, and Jesus Christ and all about it's only in difficult times do we really find out who we really are. That's where we get a real sense of our own power and our own strength of character. So in a way, is there? Are we being tested? Obviously we are being tested, but at the same time, if we were to put our faith in God and in Jesus Christ, well then it would be, you would believe that everything is going to be okay and that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I think you can't live without having hope. I think we've referred to that a couple of times. I say that again. It's very true in this context. There's no doubt about that. We desperately need hope. But having said all of that, it does nothing for me to think that people are suffering, and that young people have having jobs and so on. Now, that's not good on any level, and at a human level we're the worst of it, and it's not going to do anything for the church or for ourselves, that actual awful pain that people are going through. So I hope that will not be forgotten at the present time.
And actually, just when you do mention the church, I suppose, there's a lot of the church is without doubt facing challenges. I suppose, we talked about change earlier, but really, I mean, the changes within the church since you first entered all those years ago. So there's obviously a lot of challenges ahead, and I suppose mass attendance is one thing that really,
yes,
there's a notable decrease in it.
That's true, there's no doubt about that, yes. Having said all of that, I saw statistics recently for Europe generally, and we're still way up there at the top still, in terms of actual numbers. So I wouldn't be, now what has happened in relation to attendance in church, some people relate it in some fashion to more recent times and the scandals and so on. I think that's simplistic, I don't think it was like that, but I think what did happen was that from the 1960s until the present time, over those 50 years, there's been a gradual drop in attendance. Now, I wouldn't like to estimate the quality of Christianity just on that one criterion, because I think there are other things too that are positives, and that wouldn't be doing justice, I think, to the level of the faith, because I think the level of the faith is evident in other respects as well. And I'd be hopeful that the young generation might, find themselves thinking differently. I was reading something recently about the fact that everybody, even people in the later stage in life, not just young people, particularly for young people, start off with a faith that accepts everything, doesn't question, and that's how children are, thank God. But then a time comes when doubts come, and you're going to transition into a new situation in life, and that's when it has to become an adult faith. And even in later life, I think people go through those kind of transitions again. So I think it is a time of transition when we're asked to, think more deeply about what commitment to faith means, really.
Yeah, I suppose even, when it comes to grief or bereavement, the loss of a loved one, or, a traumatic event in a family, they also, situations like that also cause people to question.
Oh, they do.
They feel so
devastated. There's no doubt about that. I think a faith which has never asked questions is questionable if it's deep enough, because sometimes when questions come, even people who are atheistic, Pope Benedict has been saying that, by the way, that they also contribute to us, because they challenge what we take for granted, and we have to think it through again, and then in the light of what we've learned, we move on into a better place.
Yes. And that leads me on to my next question, actually, which is in relation to the Church's stance on abortion. Now, obviously, over the last couple of weeks, it has become a major issue once again, and a very emotive issue, I think, in light of the fact that Savita Halappanavar died at a hospital in Galway just last month. Now, I know that the Irish Bishops' Conference, the members of the Irish Bishops' Conference have spoken out over the past couple of days. So, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that the statement was very balanced, to be honest. I was very happy with it. And it did obviously begin by saying this was an awful tragedy and sympathising with the family and so on, which is absolutely essential that we say that at all times. We're also just reiterating what the Church's tradition has been about this subject, that it has, there isn't room in this area for second opinion in that regard, because we feel very committed to the life from its beginning. There's a lovely phrase that was used in the statement, by the way. It talked about the fact that the life of an infant, or the fetus, if you like, from the first moment of conception, is not something that's going to become human. It's becoming what is human from day one. And I was glad to see that the statement stressed the fact that all the research that is done now on human life at the beginning is underlining the fact that so many of the characteristics we have in adult life are imprinted there from the very early weeks after conception. And that's extraordinarily impressive, I think, that kind of thing to keep in mind. So it keeps people from thinking in terms of that there are just cells, they're living cells. It's a lot more than that. It's, it's a person from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think that's fundamental.
Okay. And I suppose we're getting close to the end now of the interview. But now you did memorable moments. I was going to ask you maybe 3 of your most memorable moments over the past 50 years. Now you certainly, I think you mentioned one there, which was your ordination as bishop in 1983, wasn't it?
That's right. That's
so
true.
We've one covered.
Yeah, we've one covered.
Yeah.
Well, there were so many other ones, that were very significant, and I was just thinking recently back for another reason altogether apart from this context about some of the days when we had big celebrations in St. Mel's Cathedral. There was the year 2000 was a very significant one there in the cathedral, and my predecessor Cardinal Daly came down and preached, and it was one of these days that was a beautiful day for starters, and outside the cathedral we had big tents up and we gave people food afterwards, and there was a lovely atmosphere around, and Cardinal Daly, who was dead now, God rest him, really enjoyed the day. It was really, and he added to it. There was something magnificent about that day. That was another great day in life for me in Longford. And of course there were other ones also. I was thinking also of another reason as well, because I got a communication about this, that we sent a number of priests off. We were able to had a number of priests, and we had enough to send a group out to Africa. And we had a great celebration to mark their going. It was like there was kind of a springtime feeling about it, if you know what I mean. It was recalling some of the great missionary kind of outreach we had in past times and reliving it again. So there were 3 days around St. Mel's Cathedral that for me had an atmosphere that I won't ever forget.
Yeah.
They were hugely impressive and moving.
Yeah. And then I suppose, obviously, if I was to ask you, about maybe some of the sad moments that you've had too in your career, I suppose the Christmas Eve of 2009 is probably one that...
It stands out. It'll always stand out. It will really. And I suppose getting a call at 5 o'clock in the morning to say that the cathedral was on fire was horrendous news. And watching it burn to death, so to speak, from there until 9 o'clock was absolutely, I was riven with grief, I can tell you about that, and it was just horrendous. That's, if you like to use a bad phrase, but it's burned into my memory in a way that it can never be erased. So that was one of the ones. Other ones, of course, there were sad days as well when we had tragedies in the place. And I'm just thinking of one other that comes to mind now. We had a day when we're saying farewell to the presence of the army barracks here in Longford, and we had a big celebration, and there was a kind of a final parade of the people who had been in the armed forces here in Longford, and that for so long. And I kind of looked at it, just drawing down the blinds on a period of Longford's involvement with the armed forces. I felt sad that day too, because it looked like there was an end of something. But, as we said already, sometimes when one door closes, the Lord opens another one, and there are other ones that will open up, there's no doubt about it. So I'm certainly not feeling that life is all dark, or by any means at the moment. I'm hopeful and happy in what I do, and happy to stay at it as long as God wants me there, I suppose.